Hey gang, so my financial advisors told me that I need to make more videos on animated movies in order to fund my Pikmin content. Let's talk about Pikmin villains. I mean Pixar villains. Silly me. Yeah, so 4 years ago, I made a video ranking the top 10 DreamWorks villains that did really well. It was a ton of fun to make, and I capitalized on its success by never making a video like it again for some reason. Look, can you blame me? I was too busy figuring out if the characters in Super Smash Bros. Can eat pizza or not. I honestly think I really messed up by not becoming a gaming YouTuber first and foremost, and then transitioning into film stuff afterwards, rather than the other way around. In a perfect world, every single one of my videos would be about Pikmin. I hope you know that. But oh well, that's enough existential dread. Let's get back on topic. Everyone loves to talk about classic Disney villains, and while there are a lot of individual iconic baddies from Pixar movies, I don't think they're quite as revered as a group, you know? Probably because while Disney villains have a lot of archetypes and aspects in common, Pixar baddies tend to branch out in all sorts of different ways. You got simple rivals, a couple actually good twist villains, legit mass murderers, and a kid who's just expressing his creativity, damn it! He doesn't know the toys are alive, give Sid a break! Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. Pixar villains are some of the first cinematic bad guys we ever come across in our lives. They really left an impression on a lot of us, and there's a lot to say about why most of them work really well. Most of them, because yeah, much like the movies themselves, the consistency of these villains really fell off over time. I mean, there wasn't even an obvious bottom spot for this list. I actually had to really think about 3 of these fucking atrocious antagonists, and which one belongs lower than the others. But before I tell you how much they suck, a couple of ground rules. Obviously, not every Pixar movie has a villain. I omitted the obviously villainless movies from this list, but I also wanted to be upfront with some of my perhaps more controversial omissions. Basically, I don't think there are villains in Toy Story 4, Soul, and Finding Nemo. Gabi seems like a villain at first, but the fact that they talk things out with her fairly quickly means I don't really think she counts for the purposes of this list. She doesn't feel incredibly villainous deep down. The same goes for Terry from Soul. They have no personal stake in stopping the hero. It's literally just a job for them to pick up this lost soul. Plus, the climax of the movie doesn't even revolve around them. They serve their singular purpose of bringing Joe back to the Soul World, and then they are irrelevant. Doesn't really sound like a villain to me. Finally, Finding Nemo. Bruce doesn't count, cause that was just his insatiable bloodlust talking. He's really a nice guy. Who else do we got? The dentist? Dude just wanted some fish. I don't know, he doesn't seem all that malicious. And the same goes for Darla, she just shakes a bag. Sid counts because he's constantly straight up antagonistic, but like, Darla just shook a bag, I don't know. I don't think Finding Nemo has a villain, argue with the wall. One last thing, in terms of the other movies on this list, I'm only gonna be counting the main villain of any particular movie. Like, the Underminer is not gonna be on here. I'm sorry, Underminer Nation. Sorry to undermine his influence. However, there is one movie I'm gonna have to include 2 different villains from in separate slots. And when we get to it, I think you'll know why. Okay, that's enough preamble. Let's get it going.
Disappointment in the game of life.
Like I said, I really had to think about who deserved this bottom placement. There are certainly a couple of villains more embarrassing than this guy, but ultimately, I realized that I had to give the bottom slot to the one villain whose very existence actively makes the entire film's story worse. Say hello to Emperor Zurg. I mean, realistically think about it. Toy Story 2 already had 2 antagonists in the form of Stinky Pete and Al from Al's Toy Barn. What the hell did throwing in a 3rd villain accomplish? Oh wait, I might have gotten something wrong in my notes. I don't think this is the movie Zurg is the worst villain in. Oh, here we go. I found the other movie he was in. Toy Story 3. You call this a villain role? It's barely even a cameo. Come on! Yeah, as I said, worst villain by far. He makes the story worse. You know, that still doesn't seem right. What else came out that had this guy in it? I guess there was that one fan film where it's like a hyper-realistic Buzz Lightyear, and they also copy the emotional hook of Interstellar, and most of the movie is spending time with annoying losers, and one of them is Taika Waititi, and his whole joke is that he has a pen in his suit, and he keeps wanting to use the pen, and when do you get to the climax, he uses the pen. That was the payoff. But you know what? The animation is very good for a fan film. Even so, I feel like these fans really missed the point and appeal of Buzz Lightyear. He's a corny parody of sci-fi heroes. Zurg in actual Toy Story is his father because Darth Vader parody. A ton of people saw this film and asked, why isn't Zurg his father anymore? And I think that's because if they kept Zurg as his father, that would be akin to admitting that a serious version of a goofy parody character with a goofy parody Darth Vader villain is a deeply dumb premise that never should have been made. And we can't admit that! We spent $200 million on this! Jeez, how did the fans get that large of a budget to make this? That's crazy. Anyway, the twist is that, no, this isn't Buzz's father, silly. This is an older Buzz from an alternate future timeline. Oh, okay, that makes perfect sense. What? If you haven't seen this movie, which is most of you, I assume, you're probably wondering what makes this the dumbest twist ever in anything. But to answer that, we need to talk about parallel universes. You see, Zurg is a version of Buzz from an alternate timeline where he completed his mission, but he wasn't supposed to, so they tried to arrest him, so he ran away. And he just conveniently stumbled upon a bunch of abandoned alien technology and robots. He then used all this convenient technology to travel back in time, but not far enough back in time to correct his mistake. So he needs the time crystal from the version of Buzz that currently exists in the present. The problem I have with this is that nothing in the movie ever supports the idea that alternate versions of the same character can coexist, or that going back in time is a possibility. Buzz has a brief line where he says, "What we need is a time machine," and that's all there is in terms of foreshadowing. Old Buzz doesn't discover the ability to go back in time through his ingenuity. He literally just stumbles upon technology that can do that for him. And all the robots who work for him now can't say Buzz. The only noise they can make is Zurg. So he's Zurg now. Are you starting to understand why this is the dumbest movie ever? But wait, there's more stupid shit to talk about. See, Buzz's entire motivation in this movie is to correct a mistake he made that got everyone stranded on this planet. The consequences of this mistake are basically non-existent because nobody ever expresses frustration or disappointment at being stuck here except him. Literally everyone is fine living on this planet, but Buzz is the only one who's like, no, I gotta fix this. We gotta get home. And it'd be one thing if it was just the hero of the movie who had this dumbass motivation, but unfortunately, because the hero and the villain are the same person, this is also what old Buzz's entire motivation hinges on. A problem that literally only exists in his head because nobody else cares. He spent the past 50 years thinking, no, I don't give a shit that everyone has a happy life on this planet now. I want to correct my mistakes so nobody hates me, even though nobody does. It's not like old Buzz didn't know everyone was fine. He saw his best friend get gay married and have a family. So like, what is his problem? Is he just homophobic? I think it's that. I feel like you could do something interesting with the concept of the villain being an older, jaded version of the hero. But the problem is that Buzz Lightyear in this movie is extremely flat and boring. I can't picture him going down this road as a character because, quite frankly, I can't picture him going down any road as a character. He's such a milquetoast standard good guy with a little bit of an ego problem, but it really doesn't feel that drastic. It's like they were too afraid to make him unlikable, even though the whole point of the villain hinges on the idea that Buzz has the potential to do some unlikable evil things. I don't like this movie. Does Zurg do anything cool and villainous when you detach him from the old Buzz twist? Nope. He's so boring. Just a dull, evil robot guy who doesn't have a single memorable line of dialogue. His motivation is unbearably stupid. The twist feels especially pulled out of the movie's ass. And he overall makes the entire film significantly worse. This would absolutely be the worst Pixar movie villain if it counted. But since it's a fan film, it's only really worth a dishonorable mention. Wait, what do you mean this movie was made by Pixar? What are you talking about?
Dinosaur Office! Roar!
Alright, what movie do I have to talk about next? I will pay you a bajillion shillings if you can tell me the name of the villain from The Good Dinosaur. Does anyone remember his name? It was Earl, by the way. Yeah, I bet you never would have guessed that. So this movie is a bunch of bullshit scenes strung together where Dino Kid and Dog Boy encounter various unmemorable dinosaurs and then they just move on to the next one. And I guess they're supposed to be bonding as they do this. I think this might be the least liked Pixar movie, honestly. Like, I found out over the years that Cars 2 has a lot of fans, and I always knew there were at least some people who liked Brave. But like, Good Dinosaur and Lightyear are the big two that I just do not think anyone on the planet likes. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, so Earl and his dino buddies show up in one 5-minute scene towards the middle. And you know, I thought the scene was fine. It was actually pretty funny when he suddenly ate that squirrel he rescued. But yeah, he wants to eat the dog boy and the T-Rexes chase him off, so he's out of the movie now. Except, once we get to the third act, the movie remembers that it needed to have a third act. So it just abruptly brings these jokers back. They kidnap Dog Boy, and then instead of eating him immediately, they put him in a tree where he can dodge them trying to eat him, I guess. Anyway, Earl has no character outside of just being the leader of a cult who worships storms. If that sounds interesting to you, trust me, it's not. There is no reason to ever watch this movie. Again, it was a tough decision, but the reason I ultimately put Earl over Zurg is because he doesn't actively make his movie worse. He's just kind of a victim of the fact that there's barely a plot, and what little plot they do have is being held together by scotch tape. Still, he's absolutely one of the most underwhelming, pathetic, forgettable Pixar villains. In fact, he's so forgettable that Earl isn't even his name. It was Thunderclap. Did you even notice I was using the wrong name? Be f***ing honest. 1-800-MY-LEMON. Holy shit, Cars 2 not in last place? That means I love the movie, guys. You did it. You convinced me. Yeah, so I kind of just lumped the German car in together with the twist villain car. I don't really care enough to pick one or the other. The German car is just kind of acting on the will of the twist villain car, so yeah, I don't know. The plot of Cars 2, and specifically the villain's evil plan, is so convoluted and so stupid that it's kind of delightful. Okay, so Miles Axelrod created an alternative fuel, but then he made it so the alternative fuel was bad and kills people, and so so that way he can trick people into only wanting to use oil forever. Ugh, it's so dumb, it's brilliant.
No! It's just dumb!
Okay, so the villains are lemon cars, and society stopped manufacturing their parts, and they laugh at them, and the villains are mad about that. But like, Miles Axelrod is rich. Why doesn't he just use his money and significant influence within car society to bring about the change he wants to see in the world instead of committing terrorism? Manufacture the parts yourself, asshole. I feel like this villain would have made a lot more sense if they were anyone but the richest guy in the world. Yeah, I don't know. I guess the scene where Mater finally corners him and presents him with facts and logic, forcing him to verbally turn off the bomb, was kinda neat. But like, he kinda has that usual twist villain problem where we barely get to see his evil side. Like, it only shows up in this one 3-minute scene where he's talking to all the other lemons. I think Bellwether had more time to be evil. Fucking Bellwether. As for the German car or whatever, I don't know. I guess the scene where he's interrogating the blue car to find the 2TB file is okay. That's all I got. I feel like I'm losing brain cells the longer I talk about Cars 2. Time to move on.
I went to college!
Oh god, we got so long to go before we get to the good villains. Alright, what's next? Monsters University? Yeah, I think this is a decent, kinda overhated little film. I mean, it has such a memorable villain. What was their name again? Oh yeah, the Dean. She was scared. Well, does she actually count though? Because she was kind of just a stern authority figure who changes her mind in the end. I don't know. I looked up a bunch of Pixar villain rankings, and it seems like the main consensus is that the main villain of this movie is Johnny Worthington III. Okay. Yeah, it's a douchebag rival character. Something we'll be seeing a lot of on this list. He barely gets a comeuppance. He's an asshole to Mike the whole film, and then he gets defeated at the Scare Games, and he's kind of surprised by this, but then the next scene he's totally fine and saying, "Hey Sully, welcome back to our team," even though his team lost and Sully was on the team that won. Maybe if he was a little more desperate in this scene, and like his mask came off a bit, and we realized he was just a spoiled rich brat or something. I don't know. This is just as textbook of a douchey college rival as you can possibly get. He's basically just Bradley Uppercrust III, but without any charisma or enjoyability. Not terrible, but not impressive.
That's right, motherfuckers. Jackson's back.
Oh, goody. More Cars. Look, Cars 3 is my favorite of the trilogy, and even I can't tell you a single defining characteristic about Jackson Storm. He's just the worst chick hicks. I rewatched footage of his scenes, and like, yeah, he's good at being douchey. He gets into Lightning McQueen's head pretty well. But like, I don't know, man. I feel like you could just replace any aspect of him with anything else, and it would not make a difference. His dialogue, his design, his voice. Ooh, yeah, we should probably replace his voice, actually. Yes.
Holy shit, I'm gonna come.
He serves his purpose or whatever. He's just not turning up near the top of anyone's Pixar villain lists.
Well, I knew this was coming.
I bet this lady is a lot higher than some of you were expecting. That's because Evelyn at least functions as a villain. You could tear apart so many of the writing decisions related to her, and everyone has already. But at the end of the day, she's more effective to her story than cult leader Pterodactyl and Car Who Is Mean to Lightning McQueen #2. Of course, she's still a pretty bad villain. And do I even really need to go into why? Even people who like Incredibles 2 tend to say, yeah, I'll admit the villain kinda sucked. She lacks all of the menace and stage presence that Syndrome had. She's incredibly obvious as a twist villain, considering there were really only 2 characters that it could have been, and Bob Odenkirk would have been so obvious that even Disney wouldn't try it. Her plan to ruin the reputation of Supers is so bafflingly elaborate, considering the reputation of Supers is already in the toilet when the movie begins. What is she trying to accomplish exactly? Hehehe. Now Supers are extra not trustworthy in the eyes of the general public. Okay, great. Did you really have to go through all of this to get to that point? Why not just hypnotize some Supers and hold them in place so you can slap those goggles on them and then have them terrorize the city? Put me in the writer's room, Pixar. I know my shit better than that hack fraud Brad Bird. What did he ever write? The Incredibles? Ratatouille? I could write those in my sleep. Disclaimer, this is a joke. I don't know what I'm doing, and Brad Bird is really good at knowing what he's doing. Except when he wrote this movie! It really sucks because I think the screenslaver persona is pretty intimidating and would have made for a decently effective villain if you didn't feel the need to shove a twist in there. That monologue he gives while Elastigirl is tracking him down, you know, it's at least starting to touch on an interesting ideology. It just falls apart when you realize the screenslaver's just the mouthpiece for this boring lady who got upset that her dad made a phone call to superheroes and got killed for it. If I were her, I'd be more upset that he didn't put his phone in the safe room. That would have made more sense. But regardless, it's a very contrived situation to base your entire ideology around. Honestly, I could excuse this if she was at least entertaining. Good thing she's not! I don't remember a single line out of her, and I just watched this movie yesterday. I'm gonna move on with my life now.
Oh, bear!
So the villain in Brave is Big Monster Bear, who can't talk. Yeah, I mean, sure, whatever. This thing definitely works as an intimidating force. It has a pretty sick design, some actually cool lore surrounding its origin, and it absolutely puts Merida in some precarious situations. It's just not really an exciting villain, you know? It'd be like if you made the main villain of the SpongeBob movie the Sea Bear. Like, yeah, it's scary, you gotta watch out for it, but like, not really a great character, you know? It also doesn't really show up as much as it could have, but for what it is, literally just a feral bear who kills people, yeah, it's effective, I guess. I like how it just shows up at the ending and wrecks the shit out of everybody. Like, that's cool, I suppose. Okay, back to never thinking about this movie again.
Isn't there anyone who cares about Sid?
I've seen Sid pop up on a lot of best Pixar villains, or even best overall Disney villains lists. And like, I don't know why. You could argue that he's not even a villain, just an antagonist who tortures inanimate toys because he doesn't know they're alive. He's just letting off steam. I mean, yeah, he's mean to his sister, but come on, give him a break. Yeah, he functions pretty well for what he is, but I don't think he's a really super memorable antagonist or character in general. I don't even have much else to say about him. He works, he's not amazing, but he works. I think the horrifying, stilted animation of the first Toy Story works to this character's benefit. Like, he looks as horrific as the toys see him as. I like the part where they psychologically torment him at the end. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say. He's fine. Moving on. Alright, now it's a party. Chick Hicks is the funniest Pixar villain. Not because of anything he actually says in the movie, but just his very existence just brings me so much joy. It's Chick Hicks!
Ka-chinga! Ka-chinga!
He's just a perfect douchebag rival who really does not affect the vast majority of the film's plot. And yet, his sheer hilarity is enough to propel him way higher on the list than he really deserves. It's an impressive feat to make someone more unlikable than Lightning McQueen is at the start of the film. Someone who never grows, never improves as a car person, and who ultimately fucks the king's shit up, prompting Lightning to display his truly exceptional growth and help the king cross the finish line. Okay, but like, if I was him, I would have crossed the finish line and won the race and then gone back to help the king, but I guess this is a better lesson learned or whatever. Oh well, Chick Hicks is honestly perfect for what he is. Granted, what he is isn't exactly a stellar overarching antagonist or anything, but this is still perfect for what the movie requires of its villain. This is Michael Keaton's best role to date. I will not hear otherwise.
Wait a minute, I think we were on autopilot that whole time!
I've expressed some problems with Otto as an antagonist in the past. My main sticking point is that he's a really flat character when you compare him with the other robots in the movie, who have so much expression and personality. But then a bunch of people pointed out to me that this was probably the point. Otto isn't compelling in the way Wally and Eve are because he's a deliberate contrast to them. He sticks to his programming and directive no matter what. He believes Earth is beyond saving because that's what the humans from centuries ago believed. And he lacks the free will and autonomy to question that. Okay, that's deliberate, that's an interesting character choice. But at the same time, it still doesn't really make for an interesting character. I appreciate what Otto's lack of autonomy says about the heroes, but I just don't find myself compelled by him individually. He has a lot of good attributes, like his voice is incredibly intimidating, the fact that he pretty much has command of every system on the ship makes him a formidable foe, and damn, when he tases Wally, oh my god, you really want this stupid wheel dead. A good villain, great for what they're going for, but I just don't find what they're going for super engaging personally. Boo! It's my hands. Alright, before we embark on our journey to the top 10, let me tell you all a tale of how I have too many subscription services that I get to make a video on a single show, and then I forget to cancel them. I'm a very busy individual. I got so many things to do and worry about, and as a result, all these opportunities to not waste my money on things that I'm not using slip through my fingers. Well, today's sponsor, Rocket Money, is here to help. Rocket Money is the personal finance app that helps you cancel subscriptions, lower bills, and manage your money better. I'm using Rocket Money to cancel my unwanted subscriptions, since the app safely and securely identifies recurring charges and allows you to cancel subscriptions within the app with just a couple of taps. That's so helpful because I've had a few services that require you to call and talk to someone in order to cancel them, and man, I don't have it in me to do that. I can't even call my doctor. Having this app is a godsend for making those cancellations. I'm also using Rocket Money to set budgets, since the app is able to analyze my spending habits by category and help me create a custom budget that works for my lifestyle without exceeding any limits. Rocket Money has helped save its customers up to $740 a year, with over $500 million in canceled subscriptions. To save more and spend less, join the over 5 million members using Rocket Money today. All you gotta do is go to rocketmoney.com/ShayFrillis or click the link in the description to get started for free. You can also unlock even more features with premium. That's rocketmoney.com/ShayFrillis to get started for free.
I want my board.
Charles Muntz is good. He's like the textbook example of a good Pixar villain who works for what he is. Just this lunatic who's lost himself in a singular obsession for decades. If he doesn't capture this bird, he'll never get his honor back. Oh my god, is this what would have happened to Zuko if he never found the Avatar? Yeesh. Yeah, I don't know if I have that much to say about this guy. His villainous turn makes sense. His scene where he basically tells Carl he killed a bunch of people is really intimidating. You hate his ass when he sets fire to the house. He tries to murder a child, which is always fun. He just really works for what the movie needs. Let this be a lesson. Never meet your heroes. More often than not, they will turn out to be a violent murderer bird poacher. I know this from real life experience. But nobody cares about hearing that story, I bet, so let's move on. Ercole is just Chick Hicks, but Italian, and also actually relevant during most of the story. He doesn't have the same meme factor to him, but he is a pretty pretty funny rival character. I love when he commands his one subordinate to slap the other, or how he goes on about how great and superior to everyone else he is. It's fun. He's not maniacally evil, but he fits the story super well, just being a big asshole. I like the part in the ending race where he excitedly talks about killing some sea monsters, complete with a flash of lightning. But his delivery and silhouette aren't really that scary, and then Julia murders him by knocking him off his bike. It's just a great juxtaposition between the threat he wants to be versus the pathetic little boy he actually is. He's a great character. I like him a lot. And I like Luca a lot. It's really underrated, and I don't know why we stopped talking about it. It's a pretty simple movie, sure, but it's so charming. Come on. Can we get more of this and less of Elemental, please, Pixar?
So we back in the mine.
Stinky Pete, the first ever twist villain from either Disney or Pixar. At least I think that's true for Disney, I don't remember. Anyway, yeah, he's a pretty good one. He just wants to go to Japan. Ooh, he's such a weeb. That automatically makes him one of the greatest villains to come out of the studio. But what I especially like about him is the fact that everything he does throughout the movie makes sense. The entire time, he's gently telling Woody, how long will it last with Andy? You should stay with us and last forever. Essentially, getting his way through clever manipulation. Then when he finally can't appeal to Woody through words anymore, he says, "Fuck you, we're going to Anime Land and you're gonna like it." His goals remain consistent throughout the film. It's just his manner of going about it that drastically changes once he has no choice. I also like the fact that he's so adamant that being immortalized in this museum is way better than being played with by a child, because he's never experienced that. He never got sold, and he's bitter and jealous as a result. Hell, Woody could have just sprung his Kingdom Hearts 3 speech on Stinky Pete, and it would have been applicable. My guess is that no one's ever loved Pete before, because Pete knows nothing about hearts and love. He never got a chance to make a child happy. So he convinced himself that getting played with by children sucks, and he wants Woody and Jesse to conform to his way of thinking. Too bad the indomitable bonds between children and their toys exist, you dumb motherfucker. Pretty good villain overall, even if he tends to get overshadowed by another Toy Story villain we'll get to.
Skinner!
I'm a big fan of the funny envelope opening meme guy. It's pretty fun to watch this little dude with a short temper take command of the kitchen. He has far more understatedly hateable actions than most Pixar villains, such as exploiting the image of his dead friend to make a merchandisable frozen food chain. And he's just funny as shit. You gotta love his increasing paranoia, as no one believes this phantom rat he's chasing really exists. He's a great effective villain for 2/3 of the film. But like I said in my big ass Ratatouille review many years ago, I think he kinda overstays his welcome within the narrative a bit. You don't need him in the third act, and he's probably the weakest part of it, considering how much more investing the Anton Ego stuff is. But that doesn't stop him from being one of the all-time great Pixar villains. Patrick and I were always really fond of the part where he says, "But the rat, it stole my documents." We quoted that a lot. Like, you ever have that thing you quote with your friends a ton, even though there's never a good in-context reason to say it? That's what that was. I have never once gotten my documents stolen by a rat, but boy did I love randomly saying that line.
Yes or no handshake from a rat. I steal everything.
I was honestly really surprised to tally up my thoughts on all these baddies and determine that Ernesto de la Cruz made it up so high. I mean, he's a twist villain that came straight out of the twist villain overuse era of the 2010s. How did he worm his way past characters that get way more villainous screen time? I think it all comes down to hateability and the impact of his actions. Like I said all those years ago in my Twist Villains video, Ernesto works because he's not some secret mastermind manipulating the main conflict of the story, leading to an underwhelming gotcha reveal by the end. He did one evil thing about a century ago, poisoning his best friend and stealing his music in order to get famous. Already a massive hateable dick move, but it's the unintended impacts that really makes this so much worse. Hector was just trying to return home to his family. That's all he wanted to do. And since he never got to do that thanks to this bitch, they assumed he abandoned them for generations and nearly forgot about him as they drilled a hatred for music into the heads of everyone in the family. All because someone just couldn't make it on his own without stealing and taking credit for his best friend's songs. But it worked for so long. Ernesto committed the perfect crime. One so perfect that he literally showed everyone what happened in one of his movies, and no one ever suspected him. The sheer ego and arrogance to not only attempt that, but pull it off as well, is truly remarkable. You also got to admire his willingness to throw a child to his death just to protect his reputation. That's always great to see. He loses some points because to this day, I don't understand why he didn't just tear up the photo of Hector. Like, it is the easiest solution in the whole world. What the heck is his problem, etc, etc. And his ultimate defeat is a little similar to another Pixar villain later in the list, while also feeling a lot less natural here. Do you need to exposit everything about the situation out loud, my guy? That's how you get caught in 4K and booed off the stage. Overall, the kind of twist villain you actually hate for being hateable rather than for being pathetic. He really works for what the movie needs.
Don't forget Randall.
Hey, look at that, it's Randall.
Randall is one of the most good old-fashioned villains in Pixar's entire catalog. No twists, no bullshit. He is a hater, and he is making that fact known from the second he first appears on screen. I guess I should talk about him in the prequel film Monsters University first. Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I like the backstory it gives him. How he and Mike start off on good terms as roommates before he falls in with the wrong crowd and becomes a complete douchey asshole. I honestly think it's believable the way they act in Monsters Inc. with the knowledge that they're former roommates who had a falling out. In fact, I believe their hatred for each other more since they were former roommates. But back to the Inc. Randall is just classic. Pretty much everything you can ask for in a villain under the Disney umbrella. He's equal parts funny and menacing, owing a lot of his comedic appeal to Steve Buscemi's delightfully slimy delivery, while also having a great creepy design and intimidating invisibility powers. Honestly, if you replace the chameleon with Randall, then I think most of Kung Fu Panda 4's problems would be solved. I don't know if I have a ton more to say here. Randall just works exceptionally well as this ever-present, persistent rival turned lunatic torture machine extractor. You really get the sense that he's not building the Scream extractor for the good of the company, or Monster Society at large. He probably just sees it as the ultimate way to one-up Sully and Mike. Just fantastic. His pettiness, his sliminess, the sadistic delight he takes in nearly murdering his rival. What's not to love with Randall? Come on.
Are you saying I'm stupid?
A Bug's Life is not exactly ranking very highly on a list of any kind. Unless it's a Pixar villain one, in which case, yeah, they were onto something here. Hopper is undoubtedly the highlight of the film for me. The heroes are fine, but it's one of those movies where the villain really steals the show. He only shows up in 2 scenes during the first hour, and yet his shadow lingers over all of it. The entire plot revolves around the dread of his imminent return after he demands double the usual amount of food. And said dread is really enhanced by what a great first impression he makes. He's just effortlessly intimidating while also being charismatic in a crooked and sinister sort of way. A lot of this comes from his creepy design and rough skin texture. Though, rather unfortunately, I do have to say that it's Kevin Spacey's vocal performance that really makes this character as great a villain as he is. I guess it's pretty fitting since Kevin Spacey is evil in real life. But yeah, so many of this character's lines are just dripping with malice. I've also always loved the scene where he uses grains as a metaphor to prove the might of hundreds of ants. He makes his point quite vividly by pretty much murdering these dudes right in front of all the others. It really effectively establishes why he's in charge and why everyone continues to follow his orders. But mainly, Hopper makes for such a great villain because he's the textbook definition of an oppressor. No other Pixar villain uproots the life of an entire group like this. Nor does any other Pixar villain feel quite as significant to the film's overall message. Fight back. Rise up against oppression. The moral wouldn't feel nearly as potent if the villain wasn't so effectively evil. But thankfully, he is. Oh, and his interactions with his brother are comedy gold. That's good too.
CEO entrepreneur.
Yeah, Monsters Inc. is that movie that needed 2 spots on this list. Because as great of a villain as Randall is, I feel like he's often overshadowed by the twist villain, who got significantly less screen time. How does that happen? Simple, really. Water Noose is just that good. While most twist villains feel pulled out of the movie's ass, I feel like it would be more of an ass pull if the CEO wasn't in on the evil plan in this movie. That's not to say Waternoose is predictable as a twist villain, because, well, the movie already has a villain. A really good one, Randall. So not only is it a surprise for the movie to throw in a second antagonist, but it's also a surprise that he's genuinely a better villain. There's actually a good deal of foreshadowing hinting at his true nature, such as in the commercial when he says Monsters Inc. is researching new energy techniques. Yep, they sure are. Or when he earnestly tells Sully that he would do anything to keep this company from going under. Yep, he sure would. Now that we live in an age where CEOs are more actively and loudly evil than ever, something about this guy just really hits close to home. I'm not saying David Zaslav would kidnap and torture children if he got some sort of tax write-off for it that would go towards further raising his salary.
I'll kidnap 1,000 children before I let this company die.
I'm also not saying it, but yeah, it's hard to argue that Waternoose isn't one of the most morally corrupt characters in the Pixar canon, being totally okay with hooking children up to a terrifying suction machine and extracting their screams, which I don't even want to know the details of that, all because he doesn't want his company to go under. Oh no, won't someone think of the poor company? You know what, that makes it okay. You can kidnap all the children you want now. There are some other good attributes to him as a villain. Like, his design is really intimidating, but you kind of get used to it due to his warm demeanor throughout most of the film. Then when the mask comes off, it's like, oh yeah, this guy looks horrifying, I forgot. I also appreciate that he feels realistic in the sense that he does regret the situation with Mike and Sully. He doesn't want to banish them, and he tells off Randall for having to do this, even noting what a good scarer Sully is. It's way more logical than if he had just flipped on a dime and not shown any care for his protege whatsoever, like some twist villains I know. But yeah, for the most part, his entire character honestly boils down to that one iconic line in the ending.
I'll kidnap 1,000 children before I let this company die.
Doesn't that just say it all? I honestly don't think I need to justify this placement any further. It's hard to get more evil than this. And yet, 2 Pixar villains did.
You have been replaced.
Alright, these past few villains have been pretty great and stuff, but these top 2 are the only ones I would declare to be among some of the best villains in animation history. Absolute top tier stuff we're working with now. And to start off, let's take a look at the sinister, murderous dictator who I constantly see plushies and merchandise of at the mall.
Strawberries.
Look, all I'm saying is, whether I'm a kid or an adult, I would not find any comfort snuggling up to this face after watching Toy Story 3. Quite the opposite, in fact. To this day, Lotso is the only Pixar villain who I have seen compared to Adolf Hitler multiple times. I'm not trying to say that's an apt comparison, I personally wouldn't go that far. I'm just saying, multiple people have come to that conclusion. It's a real testament to great voice acting and great writing that he manages to be as sinister as he is, looking like that. I really like his tragic backstory and how the movie doesn't even attempt to use that as a way to sympathize with him, just as a way to explain his actions. He's basically the equivalent of Woody in the first film, being bitter and resentful that someone else has replaced him, except he channels those feelings into a far darker path. It's not enough to just go in this daycare and be loved by kids. He has to exert control over the entire place, over his former friends, over all the innocent toys here, all to make up for the loss of control in his own life. See, if I were Lotso, I would have just killed the new Lotso. That seems a lot easier. He's a great manipulator, not only intimidating Chuckles into keeping quiet about the fact that he and Big Baby weren't replaced, but also convincing Buzz that the new toys should be stuck with the little kids, since the older toys can't handle that kind of playtime anymore. It sounds like a pretty reasonable explanation, even though it's all a front for this twisted caste system he's concocted. Hell, even before that, the fact that he walks in on the Buzz torture scene and has the gall to be all like, oh no, that's not how we do things at Sunnyside. It's like he relishes in manipulating people. Hell, you can also see it when he throws Woody's hat to the ground, as if to say, yeah, we got him. No, you didn't, asshole. He got away. But his friends don't need to know that. They only need to know what the master propagandist tells them. But the thing that really cements this guy as one of the most twisted motherfuckers I've ever seen in an animated film is, of course, the climax. The gang is all at the dump, headed for the incinerator. A situation Lotso dragged them into, literally, as he grabbed a hold of Woody inside the dumpster. Hey, how did he get high enough to grab him? I've always wondered that. It doesn't look like this trash was stackable enough to form a ladder. And how did the alien get trapped underneath this lid? Because logistically, based on the way he was running, that doesn't make sense. Boy, I hope Disney addresses all of these incredibly valid and movie-ruining problems when they remake this film in live action. Anyway, even after all that, Woody and Buzz risked their lives to save Lotso from the saw blade. They are just too good to this guy who frankly doesn't deserve any sympathy. But regardless, they save him and expect to be saved in return when they give him a boost to turn off the conveyor belt that's leading them into the furnace. And I knew, even as a kid, I knew he wasn't gonna turn it off. But that doesn't make this moment any less appalling.
Where's your kid now, Sheriff?
What does he even have to gain from letting them die? In this moment, he shows his true colors for all to see. Just a completely irredeemable, monstrous sociopath who quite frankly deserved to die. Pixar usually isn't one to kill off its antagonists in as gleefully gruesome ways as Disney. But oh my god, did this guy deserve to get run over by a garbage truck or something. Not tied to the hood of one. That's so lame. I am out for stuffing when I see this dumb bitch. Overall, a fantastic villain. One who would by far be the crowning jewel of Pixar's rogue gallery. If it wasn't for, well... yeah, I think we all knew he wasn't gonna be topped. Syndrome is one of the all-time great superhero movie villains, marrying some truly heinous and evil actions with some insanely hilarious mannerisms and line deliveries. He of course starts out as the dorkiest fanboy ever known to man, constantly annoying Mr. Incredible as he tries and fails to prove himself a worthy sidekick. He's kinda like if r/Shafrillis was consolidated into a single person, honestly. And then the movie flashes forward, and you kinda forget about him for a while. Until the big reveal that he's the mysterious benefactor requesting hero work out of Bob. It's all part of his plan to systematically isolate and destroy every single superhero as revenge for being shunned by Bob all those years ago. Yeah, he committed superhero genocide solely because of his bitterness and resentment towards one guy. That's genuinely insane. As memorable and fantastic as his screen presence is, the scene that perfectly lays out how sinister and ruthless he is doesn't even feature him. It just has Bob going through the records on his computer and seeing that his friends and colleagues have all been wiped out. It really hits different than any other scene the studio has concocted, going far beyond just being a signature Pixar sad moment and veering into some unexpectedly dark territory. And it all came from this, for lack of a better word, goofball. In spite of his murderous, sinister tendencies, Syndrome remains just as much of a goofy goober as he was in his youth. And the resulting mixture is just so tantalizing of a character and villain. After he sends out the lifeform scanner and it tells him Mr. Incredible has been terminated, I cannot get that smirk he gives out of my head. It's the perfect midpoint between being evil and a complete dork. And it's one of so many facial expressions and line deliveries that give this guy an almost overwhelming amount of personality. I mean, you really can't beat the 1-2 delivery punch of
And got
and
oh, this is just too good.
To say Jason Lee killed it in this role would be an understatement. And speaking of killing, his relentless murder of all these superheroes is only outmatched by his gleeful indifference to killing children with a ballistic missile. We've had Pixar villains try and kill kids before, like Ernesto and Muntz, but to them it was more so a means to an end. They didn't seem to relish in it quite like Syndrome did. Ultimately, his plan to defeat his own robot and artificially make himself a hero goes haywire. But this pathetic display does nothing to diminish how twisted and vile he is. Rather, it perfectly suits the main conceit of the character, that he isn't a hero and can never become one. That's not due to his lack of powers, rather, it's a result of his actions and irredeemable moral compass. Some people tend to view The Incredibles' message as advocating for people who are born special to do special things that people who aren't born special just shouldn't aspire towards. I don't think think that's really what the movie is saying, just because the villain doesn't have superpowers. But that's just my read of the text, and others are equally valid. Ultimately, it doesn't do anything to diminish or discredit the unique brand of malice Syndrome brings to the Pixar canon. He is undoubtedly the most evil villain they've ever created, and I don't think anyone can really argue against that. And that sheer callousness, combined with an undeniable nerdy charm that never goes away no matter the circumstance he's in, makes for a villain so consistently threatening, so funny, so quotable, so memorable, that he undoubtedly stands as one of the greatest animated villains of all time, as well as easily the greatest Pixar villain. Well, that was my list. Sorry to all 2 fans of Thunderclap out there. Nah, actually, that's a really generous estimate. Never mind. Well, that was a pretty fun video to make. And now that it's over, I can finally fund the video that I'm actually really psyched for. Ranking all the Pikmin villains. Number 1, Louie. And that's it! Thanks for watching, everyone! Good night, Tri-State Area!